On July 20th of 2012, a 24-year-old college student walked into his local movie theater with evil intentions. The Dark Knight Rises was playing this night, and this man had plans to really cause a lot of damage, and he absolutely did. This is the Aurora Theater Massacre, what really happened. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. On here, I specialize in true crime and also apparently deep diving with research. Today, we are going over the case of James Holmes and what occurred not only that night, but months leading up to it. This entire project has taken me almost 4 months to create, as it's very extensive and the amount of research I did was intense. This case has piqued my curiosity for a very long time, but here we go. James Egan Holmes was born on December 13th of 1987 in La Jolla, California, to his parents Arlene and Robert Holmes. James was a normal baby, appearing to be healthy, and Arlene and Robert's first child. To give a brief background about his parents, his mother's name was Arlene Egan and his father's name was Robert Holmes. They gave James the middle name of Egan after his mother and the name of James after his father's uncle. But Arlene and Robert met in the 1970s at the University of College Berkeley. Arlene at the time was working on a degree in English and eventually would wind up in nursing school. Robert, on the other hand, had graduated from Stanford in mathematics, and after that he went to UCLA where he obtained a master's degree, and then he went to Berkeley where he obtained a PhD in statistics. After these two met, they hit it off very well, and in fact, they'd go on to get married in Los Angeles. Not too long afterwards, they found themselves living in Washington, D.C. because Robert was working with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The couple would finally settle down in San Diego, though, and a few years after having James, in December of 1992, the couple would have another child, a girl named Chris. Now, to add a little more into James's family, his father Robert had a twin sister named Betty. They were both born in Istanbul because their father, also named Robert, was stationed in Turkey. Betty had some sort of very bad mental illness that came on early in her life. It was believed that she may have had schizophrenia or something along those lines. Not only this, but Robert's father also had some mental health issues and had even been admitted to a community hospital for disabling obsessive-compulsive disorder. On James's mother's side of the family, Arlene's father, or James's grandfather, Bert, had been hospitalized a few times because of psychosis and also depression. Plus, there were a few other unnamed family members who were hospitalized on both sides of James's family for different sorts of mental illnesses. But going back to James as a child, well, he grew up in a good household with very smart parents. He was a normal child. He had no developmental issues. I mean, he had some temper tantrums, but what child doesn't? James, as a child, loved laughing, hugging, playing. He was very normal. When he started attending preschool, everything was perfectly fine. As soon as he got into kindergarten, once again, things were still fine. Sometimes when the family would go on trips, James would be worried about robbers trying to take him, and it was stated for some time that he was afraid of nail ghosts, which were monsters that would hammer nails into the wall to try and get James, but his parents told him that there weren't any monsters, and they let him sleep in their bed. Once again, normal child things to be afraid of monsters, but little did his parents know what that afraid child would become. In 1994, the Holmes family would pack their bags and move to Salinas, California to get closer to Robert's mother's home because she wasn't doing very well. The plan was for the family to stay here for about 5 years or so, see what would happen to Robert's mother, and then think about what they'd like to do again. The parents would both get new jobs. Robert would work at a place called the Defense Manpower Data Center, and here he was working on Armed Forces Vocational Aptitude Batteries, or AFVABs. Arlene would be a stay-at-home mom for a while until she got a job working at a nursing home. James, once again, here was a seemingly normal child. He played with friends in a local creek, he dug holes in the backyard to jump in when they were filled with mud, and many other normal boy things. After James turned about 8 or so in 1996, his parents were kind of worried about him and his behavior. So the parents took him to a counselor and told him that James was doing good in school, but that at home his behavior was kind of bad, that he would sometimes throw his stuffed animals. This counselor gave his parents some ways to discipline James, and by the third visit, both Arlene and Robert told the counselor that James had made significant improvement and that they felt he no longer needed any counseling. James was in elementary school at the time, and it was stated he always had good grades and was on the honor roll, that his parents remember him as being a sweet boy who was very intelligent. One year, James even received an award for having perfect attendance, and a bunch of his teachers and faculty members that looked over him all said similar things, that he was a very bright child and he got along well with other kids. The Holmes family would go on trips all over the place, to the beach, to the aquarium, to Disneyland, to camping, to mini golf, you name it, they probably did it. At some point in time, James began playing soccer, and his father Robert said this was when he was his happiest. Robert was also James's soccer coach for some time. Not only did James play soccer, but he also did martial arts. He ran track, he played basketball and kickball, and he took piano lessons. The people that played sports with him and ran track with him said that he was a good sport, never a sore loser, and a good player. Now, one thing about James, though, was that, similar to his father, he was shy and didn't really talk too much unless he was talked to. It was said that James was protective over his little sister, and she would tell him that other kids were being mean to her, and he would stop that right away. James and his little sister were close when they were children, and he was a good older brother. Family friends of James's parents said that he was a good child who was laid back and very intelligent for being so young. At the age of 10, James said that he started to have weird thoughts of nuclear bombs going off. Though it wasn't exactly directed to anyone, these thoughts would only harbor even worse thoughts. These type of thoughts would only happen just before James would go to bed. A couple of years would go by, and in 1999, the family looked at their situation again, and by this point, Arlene had missed her family, and her mom became sick in San Diego. I'm guessing that Robert's mother ended up being okay at this point, and both Arlene and Robert also weren't happy with the schooling system in Salinas. Robert started looking around for a new job, and soon he got one at a San Diego software company, and then him and Arlene bought a new house. They decided they would leave Salinas, California to go back to San Diego sometime in April or May of 2000. James was very upset by this because he was about to lose all of his friends, and him and his sister would have to start over completely. Neighbors said that both of the children were devastated by this entire occurrence. Apparently, the day that the family would leave to move to San Diego, James was sitting in the back of their van and he started to use a piece of cardboard on his wrist. Now, when the family would arrive in San Diego, James's mother actually asked him what happened to his wrist, and he told her it was a paper cut. Also, shortly after settling down, Chris, James's little sister, said that he stopped being nice to her and playing with her, that he drifted away. James's parents hoped that he would take the move okay and integrate properly, but that's the opposite of what occurred. James made basically 0 new friends in school when they arrived, partially because it was the end of the school year, and even during the summer of 2000 though, he still made no new friends. That summer though, James was reading a ton, playing video games, and he really started to be somewhat of a loner. So James's mother stepped in and went around to their neighbors to talk to the families and introduce herself and James. She wanted to try to find kids for James to play with. That didn't work very well, and so she decided to take James to a comic book store, hoping he'd play with the kids there who would play fantasy games and things of that nature. That also didn't work, And so for that whole summer, James had a challenging time. Now by the fall of 2000, James was 12, almost 13 years old, and he went into the 7th grade and things were starting to look up. James joined the school band, he played soccer, and he also gained a lot of new friends. James would start playing Magic the Gathering with some friends, and he really seemed pretty normal. Though one thing about James, once again, was that he was shy or a bit awkward, and that was stated by a lot of different people. Now about a year or so would pass again, and the time was October of 2001. James was 13 years old still, and his parents decided to once again take him to counseling, while their daughter Chris was having a pretty easy time making new friends. James was having a lot of trouble again, and I guess the friends he made the year prior didn't stay around, so he began to become very lonesome. Though there's some contradictory statements about this, because it also says he did have friends around this point. But it's also said that James was very angry around the house and could easily flip from calm to angry. It was also around this time that James began to become practically afraid of talking on the phone, to the point where even if his mother had called, he just couldn't get himself to say anything. James basically, his entire life, went to church with his family every Sunday, and he even went to Sunday school. But he says he got bribed by donuts and Taco Bell. James wasn't exactly a man of God, however, and didn't really care for religion. He just wanted to appease to his mother because it was sacred for her. James's father kind of felt the same way as James. He just went for his wife. The rest of James's middle school experience was pretty bleh, but it was around this time his thought of nuclear bombs shifted to killing people. That entire thing for him would be considered thrilling. But do you want to know about a real thrill? Allow me to introduce you to today's sponsor, Hard Rock Neverland Casino, which is the supreme casino experience, and you don't even have to go anywhere. It's on your phone. What's even better is that it's completely free to download and then play. Hard Rock Neverland Casino is available for free on both iOS and Android, and there's well over 100 plus intriguing slot games to play. Within the app, you'll be able to find a wide variety of popular games with absolutely stunning graphics such as Leprechaun's Golden Fortune, 3 Lucky Pigs, and Viking God. Not only those, but also Hard Rock's iconic memorabilia slots. The gameplay is incredibly seamless, and it'll have you wanting to play for hours without any interruptions. Every day you log on, you'll be given a daily bonus of free spins, coins, and other exhilarating rewards. Make sure you keep your momentum onward. The best part about all of this is that Hard Rock Neverland Casino has an amazing deal going on, a $1 million cash giveaway. Every spin is a winner, and you could grab some awesome prizes. Think thousands of dollars in cash or exclusive Hard Rock merch. Picture yourself scoring collectible items, free hotel stays, or unique Hard Rock merchandise just by playing your go-to slots. Plus, when you sign up, you'll get a 2 million coin bonus. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that you're not going to want to pass up. So why wait any longer? Download the Hard Rock Neverland Casino app today. Give those slots a spin for your shot at some serious cash and join the $1 million cash giveaway. You can also snag some cool Hard Rock merch and other prizes. Just hit the link in my description and let's get this winning party started. Now, by the time high school would roll around, James was still very smart, but his thoughts were becoming darker and he told no one. Friends of his said that he pretty much kept to himself and that he was shy and a quiet guy. Though when he did become comfortable with someone, he was a normal guy who was funny. James had very good grades and was in all AP classes. He had a 4.0 GPA, he played soccer on at least the JV team, and he ran cross-country for the track team. Sometimes he would hang out with friends in high school and go swimming at their pools. James enjoyed playing paintball and, ironically, going to the movies. Secretly, however, James's negative thoughts really started to come alive. Originally, they would occur when he was starting to go to bed, but now they were starting to happen during the day as well. He started to think of people dying, and then he began to think of himself being the one to make them die. James said that he didn't hate these people, but that he just wanted to kill them. In the 9th grade, James had thought he was becoming crazy, and he really started to clam up when talking to people or certain situations would happen. When he was working or playing video games, these thoughts would pop into his mind. They were really taking over his existence. When James was about 14 to 15 years old, he started to think something was wrong with his brain, that it was broken, but this he kept private and to himself. I believe it was also sometime around this point he wanted to get into neuroscience, and so some more time would eventually pass. During the rest of his high school career, James was an awkward guy who was shy and quiet. Some people found him to be off. Others were his friends and said that he was a good person. When James became a senior, he began to apply to a ton of colleges in California. It was stated that he was accepted by every college and had received a full ride to the University of California, Riverside. Also, while he was a senior, James applied for an internship at San Diego Miramar College to work in their laboratory. James was accepted for this internship, and in order to get him ready for this occurrence, he spent 7 weeks in a guy named Dr. Terrence Sejnowski's neurobiology laboratory located at the Salk Institute at the University of California, San Diego in La Jolla. Apparently, James had the task of writing code for an experiment that involved the perception of time in humans. That summer, him and a bunch of the other interns gave presentations of their work, and James's was called Temporal Illusions. I'll play that for you now.
All right, our next speaker is James Holmes. He has, what school did you graduate from?
Westview High School?
He just graduated from Westview High School and will be attending the University of California, Riverside. He will be majoring in neuroscience. His goals are to become a researcher and to make scientific discoveries. It's a good start. In personal life, he enjoys playing soccer and strategy games, and his dream is to own a Slurpee machine. These kids have been fun to work with this summer.
Test.
He won't let you show unless you can hear.
Really? Oh, okay. Well, the lab I work in is the Computational Neurobiology Lab, or CNL for short. CNL is very computer-oriented. Basically, everybody who works in CNL does programming of some sort. One division of the lab, called M-Cell, does mathematical models of the cell, such as that picture there. There's also computer simulations of hippocampal functions and neural network firings. And the knowledge that's gained is then made available to the public and the scientific community through the web. My mentor, John Jacobson, who works in CNL, is a philosophical type of guy. He's interested in how we perceive reality, specifically grapheme perception. And graphemes are basically just letters of the alphabet. And he wants to know how graphemes are mediated in spatial frequency channels. He also studies subjective experience, which is what takes place inside the mind as opposed to the external world. I've carried on his work in dealing with subjective experience. And I've done it through Flash programming. Flash is set up to make movies. There's a timeline, which is on the top there. And within the timeline, there are layers, and layers give the movie order and structure. And within the layers, there are frames, and text, images, and code can be placed in the frames to make the movie do things. And my main task was to write code. And I was writing code to show how our perception of causality can be tricked. And a major way humans learn is through action and effect relationships. And to simulate this on a computer, we have a key press as an action, and the effect is the appearance of an image. And actions and effects have logical progressions through time. That is, effects proceed or seem simultaneous with the actions that cause them, unless we have a temporal order judgment reversal, which I just call the illusion. And in the illusion, the effect seems to precede the action that it causes. So subjectively, you're causing events to happen in the past. And to implement this illusion, we insert a series of gradual delays in between the actions and the effects. So we'd have a key press, and then a 10 millisecond delay, and then an image appearing, and then a key press, and then 20 millisecond, and then an image appears. And we keep doing this over and over again. And it would increase up to around 200 milliseconds. And we do this gradual delay incrementations to adapt the person to modify their perception of time. And then after we modify their perception of time, we completely remove the delay, and this causes the time illusion. And potential applications for this illusion are in reducing car accidents. And it might be possible to increase the reaction times of drivers. Also, another application is in the entertainment industry, like video games. And my mentor came up with the video game one, not me. So gamers might feel like they have a superpower, and that might let them have more fun. So lastly, I'd like to thank John, CNL, Sloan Center, Homesteaders, and family. If they want to give me an allowance bonus, that's good too. Okay. Any questions? Nope. Oh, you just spinning. Okay.
By the fall of 2006, James started to attend college, and this is actually when he started to go by James. His family and friends would typically call him Jimmy or Jim or names that are derivative of that, but no longer was he Jimmy. James's thoughts about killing people continued. During his freshman year of college, James lived in a dorm room and he had fun. He thought there was cool people there, and he found some friends. Those friends said he was shy, but funny, and they played video games a lot, watched TV shows together, went snowboarding, and so much more. They stated that James was a very, very good World of Warcraft 3 player, and stated he was top 5 in the world at one point. I'm unsure of how true that is. But James and all of his friends stayed friends all throughout college. Some of them stated that James was very normal, they never saw him get angry or nothing, that he didn't seem to have any issues, he never talked about weird things. James in college was said to have had an active social life. Him and his friends went out to dinner quite a lot. James's freshman year was normal, and when it was over, he moved into an apartment that was on the campus. His sophomore year of college was also pretty normal, and between that year and his junior year, he started to actually date some girls. James, those years, was working as a summer counselor at a camp for underprivileged children at the Jewish Big Brothers Big Sisters of Los Angeles, Camp Max Strauss. He met a counselor there and they kind of hit it off, but nothing really came from it. James also had a crush on another girl, but he never talked to her or tried to ask her out, and so she really probably barely even knew he existed. James, as a summer counselor, had zero problems and enjoyed helping the kids. His coworkers said he was a good counselor and a goofy guy, that he would make the kids laugh. Now, by James's senior year at college, he would move into an off-campus apartment, and that year he applied to several university graduate schools that had neuroscience programs. When James began to apply, he had a GPA of just about 4.0. He was a member of the Phi Beta Kappa, the oldest academic honor society in the United States. He was a dean's fellow or a teacher's assistant, and once again, he had a full ride scholarship. Apparently, however, in James's applications to the colleges, he was a bit weird in his writing and the way he interpreted things. But after applying to all of these colleges, he was only offered an interview by one of the programs, and that college turned him down. All 8 of the colleges he attempted to go to told him no, and within a few weeks from that point, he would graduate from the University of California, Riverside. This was in 2010. After graduating, James would go back home with his parents, and he tried to get several jobs, but was unsuccessful. James began watching TV and playing video games all the time, staying up late, and basically he stopped being productive. His parents told him that if he didn't stop being so lazy and get a job, that they were going to kick him out. In October of 2010, James got a job working with Aerotech Staffing. He would be operating a pill coating machine. James did this from 4 p.m. to 2 a.m. Monday through Friday. The people that worked with him stated he was a good employee, and most saw him as nice but standoffish, and some people thought he may have disabilities. Apparently, one time he was seen in the corner, standing by himself, and he was laughing very hard. Also, it was stated that some people had problems with him there and would harass him, and other people would step in to save the day. James would pretend that it never happened when asked about it by management. After only about 3 months or so of working there, James quit. By 2011, the first half, James, with a ton of pushing from his parents, applied to 6 more colleges that had neuroscience programs. One of those schools was the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus, located in Aurora and Denver. They accepted only 6 new trainees for the neuroscience department every year, and in February of 2011, James met with 7 different faculty members separately. They basically all stated that James was a good choice and believed he would be a good student. Every single person recommended that James be given admission immediately except one of those people. They may have had some intuition, but James was offered to come to the school with his tuition completely waived, and they gave him a stipend for $26,000. I also saw that it could have been $21,600 a year from the NIH or the National Institutes of Health. James was also given a $5,000 stipend from the University of Colorado as well. It was stated that he would receive just about $2,000 a month from these stipends. But James accepted the NIH's offer, and on April 28th of 2011, he flew out to Denver and rented an apartment. I am unsure exactly how much money he'd pay, but later he'd go back to San Diego to get his white Hyundai Tiburon his dad bought for him several years prior. His dad actually asked him if he wanted him to go and help, but James denied and drove to Colorado alone. After getting settled into his apartment, James would typically ride his bike to campus rather than driving. Typically, his apartment was kept very clean and orderly, but that would change not too long from this point. But at this college, for the most part, his peers and teachers stated he was a normal guy. It was also stated that James and a couple of the friends he made at school would go to the movie theaters quite a lot. Not only this, but apparently James occasionally was given the task of having to kill gerbils to basically experiment on their bodies. No information was given about how he reacted to being the one to kill them. James this year, though, became very close to 3 people, and those people's names were Ben, Tim, and Gargi. Gargi was typically the one calling the shots with most things, and James would just tag along. The group went out to eat a lot, played board games, drank a little bit, and sometimes smoked the good green. They would all go on trips together, and sometimes they'd go on hikes. They'd also go to the movies. One of the films they saw was Sherlock Holmes. Ben and James got along very well and became best friends, while James and Gargi really hit it off, and by October of 2011, they started to go on dates together. Gargi invited him to a horror film festival, and from this point forward, they went on a ton of dates, like going for Slurpees, watching Saturday Night Live, playing games, etc. James in college at this time was said to have been slacking off pretty heavily, not really caring about his work. His professors said his work was mediocre, and both the professors and other students said he'd leave early and didn't care about the tasks. Now, in November of 2011, James, Ben, Gargi, and their other friend Tim went shopping for a gun. It was specifically Tim shopping though, because he liked shooting and wanted to get a new pistol. Tim would buy a gun that day, and then he showed it to his friends, including James, and he said when James held the gun that he held it wrong and couldn't even rack the slide. That James said he was surprised the gun was so heavy. By December of 2011, it was stated that James went to see a movie with his friends, and that movie was Mission Impossible. But in about mid-December, James went back home to spend Christmas with his family. During Christmas, James somehow developed mono, but went to see a few doctors and ended up being okay from it, or so they thought. By December 30th, James returned to Colorado. Now, in January of 2012, something happened to James, and what exactly that is, I don't know. Around this time, he stated he began to see things, dark things, and that he believed that some of his issues were because of mono, that his mind began to fall apart. James's closest friends would start to pick up that things were off with him in late January. Around that time, James texted his friend Ben and said something to the extent that he had psychotic delusions and that he was keeping it a secret. February would roll around, and on the 14th, or Valentine's Day, James decided to make a good dinner and night for his girlfriend Gargi. By late February, Gargi would break up with James, and he took this pretty hard as he said he loved her, but Gargi didn't love James and didn't see a future with him, though these two would remain cordial, or more or so friends with benefits. Now beginning hard around late February as well was James seeing things, such as shadows moving and dancing, or taking the shapes of people, and sometimes these shadows would have guns. James said that he wasn't afraid though, and wanted to learn more about them, but they would disappear as soon as he stopped concentrating on them. By March, the friend group of James, Gargi, Ben, and Tim started to kind of break apart, and it was mostly due to the fact that only James was a part of the neuroscience department, and the group just had different lives. However, James would still talk to Gargi the most. Early March is when Gargi started to become worried about James and what he was saying, and told him that he needs to go and see a therapist. About a week or so would pass, and on March 16th, James visited a counselor named Margaret and told her quite a lot. He said that him and his girlfriend just broke up, that he didn't trust people, that he liked pulling his hair out, and that he had thoughts of killing people, but no one in specific. Margaret said that it was hard to interview James though, because he would go into a blank stare and take quite some time for him to answer. For some reason, Margaret wrote down that James was not dangerous and that he had OCD. Margaret also referred James to a psychiatrist named Dr. Lynn Fenton, who was the medical director on the Anschutz campus. Margaret emailed Lynn and told her that James was the most anxious guy she's ever seen, and that he probably has OCD. Also, that she's concerned that James has thoughts of killing people, but she doesn't think he's dangerous. Lynn also said that James told her he didn't want to tell her everything that was going on with him. I'm confused about that, so let me chime in for a moment. James was saying that he wanted to kill people, but the counselor didn't think he was dangerous. I feel like I've heard that way too many times with these cases. Another week would go by, and on March 21st, James had the first appointment with Dr. Fenton. James told her that he was depressed about Gargi breaking up with him, and that this made his homicidal ideation much worse. Now, James told Dr. Fenton all about how he wanted to kill people, but that he didn't have any specific plans or targets, and he didn't want to take himself out. So Dr. Fenton took this as James isn't dangerous, but that he needed more understanding. Dr. Fenton diagnosed James with social phobia, OCD, and perhaps a bit of schizoid personality disorder. Dr. Fenton prescribed James with medicine for anxiety and depression, specifically 50 milligrams of Zoloft and 50 milligrams of clonazepam. This didn't help James, and in fact, James would start to become much worse and very rapidly. James's texts with Gargi got darker as the days went on. For example, he texted her on March 25th and said, "What I feel like doing is so evil, so can't do that." And Gargi said, "What is so evil that you want to do?" James told her, "Kill people, of course. This is why I live in the future." Gargi replied, "Killing people is too much effort. You'll end up locked up. Most people are not worth what might happen to you because of the act." James replied by saying, "That's why you kill many people." Gargi said back, "Even then, at least personally, I'm selfish and have too much of an idea of self-importance. Most people aren't worth jack shit. Even if you go postal, what's it worth? What do you gain?" James told Gargi there is no way to do it and not get caught, but the only way justice can be served is by taking away your time or life. Gargi asked James, "Why do you care so much about justice? If you wait to kill until the end of your life, then there is nothing to lose." Gargi asks, "But why would you want to kill, as in, why would you decide this is the end and kill when you could live more, experience more things? Why would those people be worth ending your life? James tells Gargi, it's the end then though. No more experiences. Now this day, I believe, or March 25th, was also the first day that James is going to mention something he deemed human capital. I'll read the exchanges between him and his ex-girlfriend. Human capital. Some people may make $1 million, others 100,000, but life is priceless. You take away human life, and your human capital is limitless. Gargi. It depends on the perspective. What would you do with the human capital? James, have a more meaningful life, because if there is a meaning to life, and if you take that away from other people, you have prevented their purpose. Gargi said, someone else will fulfill the purpose then. It doesn't help you, it may satisfy you, but it doesn't help you fulfill your purpose. James replied and said it still makes my life more meaningful, increasing my human capital by taking theirs. Gargi said, I don't understand the concept of human capital. I don't see how it is useful. It's not being incorporated into you. You are just taking away a life. That seems to be like destruction. James said, I don't believe there's absolute good and evil. Gargi said, if you want to kill people, why don't you kill me and Ben and other people who are around you and have wronged you? James said, I would be caught and could not kill more people. I would also lose the rest of my life. That's why I won't kill until my life is nearly over. Your meaning of life doesn't address the meaning of death. Life came into being and ever since has been a cancer upon death. Gargi said, I don't understand the purpose of your view, but that could just be because I don't think the way you do. James replied, were we not dead before we were alive? I am not inherently evil, Gargi. My outlook on destroying life is plan B. I also found a purpose for good. After these messages, Gargi would show them to their friend Ben because she thought James was starting to lose it. Neither of them ever thought he would become violent, though. Eventually, Ben would text James, and James told him that he thinks he's psychotic and dealing with delusions. But 2 days would go by, and on March 27th of 2012, James visited Dr. Fenton again, and this appointment lasted for 15 minutes. James told Dr. Fenton the clonazepam makes him sleepy, and so she upped his dose of Zoloft to 100 milligrams per day and prescribed 100 milligrams of propranolol per day instead of the clonazepam. The next day, on March 28th of 2012, James told his parents that he put $4,500 into his Roth IRA account. If you're wondering exactly how James had that money, I'm going to guess it's from the stipends that he received. Though he still would have obviously had to pay for other things, I believe his parents helped him out with money. It was stated that he worked at McDonald's for a bit, but a spokesperson for McDonald's came out and said that that was false. Now, April of 2012 was certainly an interesting month, and things would only get worse from here. On the 1st of April, James's father, Bob, tried calling him, and James didn't answer. In fact, James would ignore his father this entire month and some time after that. On April 2nd of 2012, Gargi, James's ex-girlfriend, told him that she just wants to be friends, no longer with benefits. James told her that he cannot just be friends with her, and so he started to look for someone else. The day after that, on April 3rd of 2012, James had his third appointment with Dr. Fenton, and he told her that he was feeling less anxious, but he was still tired and having trouble remembering some things. Dr. Fenton made some minor adjustments to the medicine dosages and said that James was very reserved during the session, but clearly withholding something. That he smiled at times, but pretty much made no eye contact. 2 days after this visit, on April 5th of 2012, James had figured out he received an A in his neuroscience course. All of the professors who helped teach this course stated that James did exceptionally well, and that he even had a perfect score on the anatomy portion. A couple days would pass, and on April 9th of 2012, for some reason James decided to text a fellow neuroscience student named Hillary Allen. Hillary didn't know who was texting her, and so she asked, and James said it was him. He got her number, he said, from her roommate, and they kind of hit it off and decided to plan a date, a hike, but I'll get to that soon. On April 17th of 2012, James had his fourth appointment with Dr. Fenton. He told her that him and Gargi had broken off their relationship completely and that he had started a new relationship with Hillary. James said that he was taking the medication, but that it didn't seem to be working. He continued by saying that he's still thinking badly about women, killing people, and other things, but he didn't go into detail. He refused to. This is specifically when Dr. Fenton asked him if he had any plans regarding homicidal ideation. He stated that he wasn't suicidal. This same day, James asked Dr. Fenton if she could tell him her own view about the meaning of life. Dr. Fenton decided to turn it back to James to figure out what his was, and he got upset and told her, "I've told you all of mine. Are you just a pill pusher?" Dr. Fenton would write that James had a psychotic level of thinking, that he was guarded and paranoid, and has hostile thoughts that he won't elaborate on. Dr. Fenton was concerned about James, but she said his hygiene appeared to be okay, and that he was functioning well in school with his grades. This day, she added another diagnosis to James, and that was schizotypal personality disorder, and basically this just meant that James was further deranged. Dr. Fenton also wrote that she's worried about James and his homicidal ideation. Dr. Fenton also said that she's going to bring in a male doctor named Dr. Robert Feinstein, because she thinks that James would potentially do better with a man. James said to her, "Oh, it'll be to lock me up." Dr. Fenton replied with, "No, it will help with the treatment." After this appointment was over, Dr. Fenton gave James his prescriptions for the pharmacy, and on one of them, she accidentally wrote James Hughes rather than Holmes. When James went to the pharmacy, the pharmacist noticed this and must have said something to James. While James was at the pharmacy, he sent Dr. Fenton an email with this as the subject line, and a sentence that said, "An inconvenience, Fenton. Holmes." Now, about a week or so later, on April 25th of 2012, James and Hillary went hiking together, and James brought snacks. This little date went okay. 5 days would go by, and on April 30th of 2012, it was stated at this point, James had around $11,000 in his bank account. Anyway, May to mid-July is where everything really starts to happen, and James's plans start to really fall into place. On May 1st of 2012, James first paid his rent and renewed his lease for 6 months. This same day, apparently someone tried to break into Hillary Allen's home, the girl James was kind of talking to. So James that day bought a Smith & Wesson folding knife and a taser which looks like a cell phone. Apparently also the same day, James tried to buy a Glock 34 9mm handgun from TGS.com, and it said that his credit card was charged, but the pistol never got delivered. I'm unsure what happened there. But on May 10th of 2012 is when James really started to buy gear. So this day, he purchased 2 canisters of Clear Out, which is a police-grade tear gas, for a total of $43.79. On a different website, James bought an SGE 150 complete kit, including the mask and NBC filter, for $133.74. This is a gas mask, and this is a very important detail to remember for later, as there is some big discrepancies with this gas mask. Just stay tuned. James was becoming more and more distant from his friends and family though, and on May 8th of 2012, or Memorial Day, he emailed his parents stating that he is avoiding moving home unless it's a last resort to being homeless. A few days later, and James would make his first major purchase. On May 22nd of 2012, James went to a local sporting goods store and legally purchased a Glock 22 40 caliber handgun. This purchase cost a total of $647.99. About 6 days would pass, and on May 28th, James would make another purchase. This day, he bought a Remington 870 12-gauge shotgun from Bass Pro Shop for a total of $469.18. James, with this purchase, knew it was final, that he was going to go through with his plan. On May 31st of 2012, James had another appointment with Dr. Fenton, and this time Dr. Feinstein. This day, he told them that he was playing video games a lot recently, specifically Diablo 3, and he was playing about 100 hours per week, which is insane to think about. That's like 15 hours a day, if not more. James continued by telling them he doesn't care about studying anymore, that he hates sheeple, and told them that he's been reading about the Tylenol murders, Ted Kaczynski, and work from Friedrich Nietzsche. Towards the end of this session, Dr. Feinstein had suggested the use of antipsychotics for James and another visit. James agreed to another visit, and that would be on June 11th. Both psychiatrists this day agreed that James, who was saying very ominous but vague phrases, was suspicious, but unfortunately they couldn't get him arrested because of how vague everything was. A couple of days would go by, and on June 6th of 2012, James bought a pair of handcuffs, a first aid kit, and 2 boxes of 4-road stars, which are used to deflate tires. The handcuffs were specifically bought with the intentions of locking the theater doors to trap people inside. The total for this purchase was $80.94. The next day, on June 7th of 2012, James had to take his preliminary oral exams, which would allow him to continue in graduate school. Apparently, James had told some people this day that he wanted to see if he could pass the exam without studying. Well, James failed the exam pretty badly, and later this day, he decided to go to a sporting goods store and buy a Smith & Wesson M&P 15 .223 rifle for a total of $968.38. 4 days later, on June 11th of 2012, James would meet with basically the main professor, and the professor told him he can retake his exams in a few weeks and that he's confident James can pass and move on to the second year. James said, "No thank you," and decided to quit graduate school right then and there. The professor would send James an email later asking him to confirm his decision, which he did. James and Hillary, his little fling, would text later that day, and he told her that he didn't pass and that he's quitting. Hillary thought that he was joking. James also, this same day, went to see his psychiatrists, Dr. Fenton and Dr. Feinstein, again. He told them how he quit school, about where he'd live, about telling his parents, and a bunch of other things. James would also quit therapy this day as well. The psychiatrists told him that he can stay till the end of summer, but he didn't want to. After this, Dr. Fenton called 2 of his professors. It's unclear what they talked about, and she also called James's mother. James's mother said that she was worried about him every day of her life. Dr. Fenton and Dr. Feinstein saw what James was capable of, and they knew, but how much could they really have done? James, from this point forward, is going to get very prepared. I'm going to just kind of run through what he did, as there was a lot happening in June and July. On June 12th, James's college deactivated his school card key, and it may have been this day he dyed his hair red or orangish. He supposedly did it to differentiate himself from who he normally was. The next day, on June 13th, James went online to a sporting goods store and bought a 100-round magazine for his AR-15, a laser sight, and some hearing protection for $1,181.77. The day after that, on June 14th, James decided to apply for unemployment, and the day after this, on June 15th, is when James cut off all contact with Hillary and claimed it was because he didn't want her to be the girlfriend of a murderer. 2 days later, on June 17th, James bought a bunch of targets and stands so that way he could practice shooting. 2 days after this, on June 19th, James bought a red laser sight, some .40 caliber ammunition, and 10 Glock magazines. The next day, on June 20th, James randomly decided to enroll into a motorcycle class that would last for 3 days. This was said to be at the Lowry Air Force Base, and James paid $175. From June 23rd to the 26th of 2012, James attended that 3-day motorcycle class and passed. I don't know what the purpose of this was. But then on June 24th, James started to search for shooting ranges, and the next day on June 25th, he emailed one to see if he could apply. Specifically the Byers shooting range, which was located about 2.5 hours away from Denver. Eventually, the range owner called James to talk to him about becoming a member, and the owner called him 3 times. Apparently, James was acting very weird and slurring his words, and that he almost sounded like The Exorcist. The owner told his employees "Do not accept this man into the club," so they didn't. That same day, or the 25th of June, James also ordered spirit lenses, or as he called them, possession lenses. They were all black and cost around $300. Plus, he went to another website on June 25th and decided to buy an advanced combat ballistic helmet for another $335. 3 days later, on June 28th, James ordered a lot of ammunition, specifically almost $2,000 worth. Notably AR ammunition and pistol ammunition, but he also ordered birdshot for the shotgun for some reason. The next day, on June 29th, James went to the Century 16 cinema and decided to take photos of inside of the cinema. The day after that, on June 30th, James bought a pair of ballistic chaps for $858 online. 2 more days would go by, and on July 1st, James went to a sporting goods store and bought 3 snap caps or dummy rounds for his 12-gauge shotgun, his 223 rifle, the 40 caliber handgun, and he also bought a strike fire mount. In total, he spent $233.23. The day after this, on July 2nd, James looked up on his computer how to make bombs, and also military tactics and strategy and Columbine shooting police response time. A bit later into the day, around 2 p.m., he decided to drive to the shooting range, and he was pulled over for doing 66 in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. I don't know if he got a ticket or not or what happened because of this, but after he finished up at the gun range, he decided to buy even more gear. When James got home, he visited a body armor website and bought torso neck protection, a flat groin protector, and bulletproof arm protection, all level 3A, which was the highest level of protection available. In total, the cost was $903.67. Another 2 days would go by, and on July 3rd, he bought a ton of stuff, such as motor oil, batteries, launch control, eclipse, plastic spheres, 6 plastic mortar shells, and a launch control receiver. James was going to build bombs, and the total of everything was just about $300. 2 days later, on July 5th, James decided to start an adult friend finder account and had wrote on his profile kinda similar to Match, "Will you visit me in prison?" The same day, he decided to take a selfie in his gear, and way later into the day at 11:30 p.m., he took pictures of the emergency exits of the Century 16 theater using floodlights. This same day, James had his California unemployment benefits denied, and so his parents transferred him $5,000 that was left over from a college fund. They also sent him an additional $3,000 for his college account. A day later, on July 6th, James went to Bass Pro again, and this time bought a 23 Glock 40 caliber, more ammunition, smokeless gunpowder, a foresight, and some gun cleaning supplies. The total cost for everything was $1,149.24, and initially James's MasterCard got denied, so he used another card, and it went through. The next day, on July 7th, James bought a movie ticket for The Dark Knight Rises. Now, by this point, he had been writing in his notebook like crazy and detailing exactly what he was going to do and why. He chose a movie theater because it was easy for him, and he chose theater number 9 for some reason. I assume it's because of where it was located. When James bought his ticket, however, he was given a ticket for theater number 8. 3 days would go by, and on July 10th, James went to Best Buy and bought a pair of over-the-ear Studio Beats, a pair of Jaybird Freedom earbuds, and a 4th generation iPod Touch. He spent a total of $637 with tax. The day after this, on July 11th, James went to O'Reilly Auto Parts and bought a gas can, diesel oil, window tint, a sunshade, and spray paint for $120.36. The gas can will be brought up again a bit later. Way later into the night and early into the next morning at 12:28 a.m. on July 12th, James went to the Century 16 theater and took pictures of the emergency exit doors again. The next day, on July 13th, James would go to the cinema again at about 9 p.m. and buy another ticket to the Batman Midnight premiere in theater number 9, but once again, he's placed in theater number 8. 2 days would pass, and on July 14th, James went to the science company located in Denver and bought a ton of materials to build bombs. The total cost was $175.69. 3 days would go by, and on July 17th, James had his final gear arrive, and he was basically ready. On July 18th, James went to Best Buy and bought batteries, a boombox, and a tank to contain whatever he wanted. The total was $164. The next day, on July 19th, was the day before, but kind of the day of everything would take place. James started off this morning by first wiring and essentially setting up all of the bombs inside of his house. The bombs were pretty sophisticated, according to the FBI, and James had plans for his neighbors to basically find ways to detonate them. Also, a thing to mention here is that a few days prior to July 19th, James rode his bike to an ATM, unsure why he rode his bike, but he then withdrew about $400 in $20 bills. On July 19th, he decided to burn the edges of all the bills for some reason and put them in his notebook he wrote inside of a large envelope he purchased at the grocery store several days prior. James doesn't know why he burnt the money, but he decided he was going to mail this notebook and money to Dr. Fenton, his psychiatrist. Partially because he said that if he kept seeing her, he wouldn't have committed the murders, and so that way he could educate Dr. Fenton and other doctors on how to prevent future killings. Eventually, at about 1:30 p.m., he would mail this package to Dr. Fenton and then go back home. At 5:17 p.m., he decided to put all of his gear on his bed and take a photo. About an hour later, at 6:22 p.m., James took a bunch of photos of him in his gear, some smiling, some with gun, some with bombs, etc. He didn't have much time to try and use the contacts because I believe they may have just arrived that day. He wanted to use them to commit the shooting, but he didn't have time to practice shooting the guns with them. Sometime later, after James got all of his gear ready, including his entire bomb getup, he doused the place in gasoline and then took a hydrocodone, which was to help him keep shooting in the case he himself got shot. James then loaded his car with all of his gear and left the house at about 11 p.m. What he would do after this point was absolutely sickening. James would drive to the theater, and he said he did it very carefully because he didn't want to get pulled over. When James arrived to the Century 16 cinema, it was a little after 12. He parked his car, which for reference was a white Hyundai Tiburon, which his father helped him buy, and it said he parked his car behind the rear exit very close to Theater 9. This is an image for reference. Also, I don't know what took him so long to get there or what happened in between, because the theater wasn't that far from his home. James would then walk inside of the theater. Now, mind you, he didn't have his gear on at this point, because I guess he had a plan. Now, you can see when he walks in, he holds the door open for someone, which is just kind of weird to see. This night was apparently the midnight premiere of the movie The Dark Knight Rises. But James was wearing a skull cap, some sort of maybe athletic type pants, a t-shirt, and a long-sleeved shirt over top of that one. He was also wearing boots. James had a ticket for Theater 8 because he tried buying one for Theater 9 3 times and failed each time. But regardless, he was still going to go inside of Theater 9. This is what said happened. James walked into Theater 9, and at this point the previews for the movie had already started. James went to the front of the theater, and he sat down for a minute or two, and then he took out a cell phone and faked a phone call. James then went over to the exit door and opened it, and put a tablecloth clip between it to keep it open. I'm unsure what happened with the handcuffs. Now typically, these type of doors are emergency doors, and when you open them, an alarm sounds. This exit had an exit sign on top, and right next to it was a fire alarm. But for some reason, it wasn't an emergency exit. It was a regular door that people could just come and go through, which doesn't make too much sense. But James would do that, and he'd prop the door open and then go to his car to put all of his gear on. He put his sun visor up so no one could see through the front windshield, and his windows were tinted. This was with the tint he bought several weeks prior. While James was getting ready, he heard and saw an employee putting trash into the dumpster next to him. James panicked a little bit, but was ready to shoot him just in case, but that didn't need to happen. The employee was able to just go back inside. And just to mind you, James was getting ready in his car somehow. I don't know how he didn't have to step out to put any of the gear on, but he somehow managed to get geared up in his car. James, after getting completely geared up and ready, called the CU Hospital's mental health line. After 9 seconds of not hearing anything, he hung up. The operator who took that call said that she didn't hear anything either. James would step out of his car, and as he did, he dropped one of the tear gas cans and he couldn't find it. After looking for it for a second, he walked right to the door that he propped open, and it said for several minutes he just stood there and thought about the FBI stopping him. That he supposedly hoped and thought that he was under FBI surveillance because he had seen FBI marked SUVs at the shooting range and at his home. But eventually, after the FBI did not arrest James like he was thinking, he put techno music on his iPod, cranked it very loud, put his gas mask on, and then went inside. He had opened one of the tear gas cans outside, and when he made it inside, he threw it immediately across the theater. After this, James took out his shotgun and shot one shot into the air and then fired the next 5 rounds into the crowd towards the back left corner. Mind you, this was with buckshot rounds. James stated he used a shotgun to cause a lot of damage. After this, though, James would drop the shotgun on the ground and take out his AR-15. James was firing and targeting people as he was shooting, and this was backed by evidence. James said that he was shooting randomly and that he couldn't see well because of the scratches that were on his visor. I don't know how scratches got on it considering it was new. But James was particularly focused on people who were running away from him. At this point, the entire scene was hectic. People in Theater 9 were getting shot left and right. Tons of people were running for their lives. Everyone was screaming. It was terrible. James was directly in front of the theater screen, shooting anyone he could. All of a sudden, though, after shooting 65 rounds from the AR-15, it jammed. This was because most likely, accidentally, James put 101 rounds into his magazine for the AR-15. This caused the weapon to have a misfeed, and because he didn't know how to clear it, he attempted to put another magazine in it, but it wouldn't click in. James then went next to the wall, heading towards the exit to try and fix his gun, because he said it was safer there so no one could see him trying to mess with it. Now, it's unclear exactly when, but James also shot his pistol 5 times in total. After attempting to fix his gun for a minute or two, he decided to give up because he couldn't. He looked at the theater and what he did one last time, and apparently saw a guy, the only person he remembers from the theater, sitting in the front row, smiling creepily. James would then go out of the same door that he propped open, and right there he dropped the AR-15. Next, he would go out to his car, stand next to it with his driver's side door open, and put his pistol on the roof. This was all while people were still running out of the building, including from the same door that James went through. Meanwhile, the police were first called at 12:38 a.m. There was a total of 42 calls, and they arrived there within minutes. Specifically, 2 officers, one named Jason Sweeney and the other named Jason Oviette. To make it a little short at this point, the 2 of them met up and started following blood splatter that was on the sidewalk to find a way in. James apparently saw them while he was next to his car and thought about shooting them, but didn't want to die. The 2 officers then saw James, and at first they thought he was a part of the SWAT team because of his black helmet, gear, and now remember this because it's important, his gas mask. They said that he had his gas mask on. Both of the officers said this. Officer Sweeney realized that James's gas mask wasn't the usual police-issued ones, and they heard from their police radios that there was gas in the theaters. Immediately, the officers put 2 and 2 together and realized this unknown man was the culprit. From about 20 feet away, the officers started to yell at James and point their guns at him. James would give up right away, putting his hands into the air, and Officer Oviette said that he was very calm, disconnected, and not showing any signs of emotion. The 2 officers then started to check James for weapons, and a magazine pistol fell out of his vest. They found another magazine pistol that was in his pocket, a large knife on his belt, and a Smith & Wesson folding knife in his pocket. Eventually, the officers put James into Officer Sweeney's patrol car. Officer Sweeney asked James if anyone else was involved, and James said that it was just him. Officer Sweeney then asked James if he had any bombs or explosives, and he said that he has improvised explosive devices set up all over his house and that they'll go off if someone trips them. Officer Oviatt was actually a bit worried there was a second shooter because of some reports that I'll also get into later. But after a few minutes, I guess Officer Oviatt also got worried that James wasn't fully disarmed, so they stripped him all the way down to his underwear and t-shirt. What Officer Oviatt remembers is that James was dripping from sweat and smelled horrible, but eventually they would take James to the station. Meanwhile, the officers had to deal with an incredibly gruesome scene. James caused a disturbing amount of damage in a quick period of time. In total, 12 innocent people were murdered, most of them young adults in their 20s, but also a 6-year-old child. 58 other people were shot, 4 people were injured from tear gas, and 8 others were injured trying to flee. 3 of the people shot weren't even in Theater 9, they were in Theater 8, but the bullets went through the walls. Once again, James told the police that there were bombs in his apartment, so they evacuated the entire place and had the bomb squad go in and defuse it, I believe with some help from James. The FBI expert who would later testify would say it was a very extensive bomb, and they even had footage from the robot that went in, and it's kind of interesting. But the police took James to the station, and sometime early in the morning, at about 2:40 a.m.-ish, they would give James a little interrogation before he asked for attorneys.
Sir, how you doing tonight? I'm Detective Chuck Mill. This is Detective Craig Apple. I would like to talk to you here tonight. Would you do me a favor and sit over here for me? Would you mind doing that for me real quick, please?
Hey, you need anything to drink, sir? Water or anything?
Yeah.
What would you like to drink?
Water.
Just water? Okay, sure. Okay.
I'll get the officer.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, just sit down. Seat there for me, please.
Yeah, we're okay, yeah.
Thank you.
You want me back there? Or?
No, I'll sit back there and just change that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll get a water for you, sir. Okay. He'll be here right away. Again, sir, my name is Chuck Mill.
Okay.
I'm sorry?
Mill.
No. Yeah, very good. And this is Detective Apple. Could we get your name?
I already gave my name.
Okay. I haven't talked to anybody who has your name. If you could just tell us what your name is.
It's James.
James, okay.
Holmes.
James what?
Holmes.
Holmes? How do you spell that, please?
Like Sherlock.
Okay. So Holmes?
Yes.
Okay. What's your birthday?
12/13/87.
Okay.
James, you okay? I mean, is there anything we should know about? Are you injured or anything other than some scrapes? Anything?
No.
We're here to help you.
Yeah. We're just we're going to make this as easy as possible as we can on you. Okay. And we have water coming here. So, other than that, do you need anything?
Oxygen.
Okay. Want me to bring a fan in here, get some air circulating or anything?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Are you good to talk with us? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Are you having trouble breathing?
No.
Okay.
There you go, James. If you want more, just let me know.
Yeah. Do you need us to get you some help, or are you good to talk to us?
Help is in counsel?
No, as in, to make sure you're okay physically. The paramedics check you out. Are you okay there? You good to talk to us?
Yes.
You good to talk to us?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. James, before we get, is it okay if I call you James, by the way?
Yes.
Okay. What I'd like to do here, I'm sure you have some questions, and we have some questions, okay? Before we have a chance to talk, okay, we got to get a couple things out of the way, then we'll have a chance to talk, and I'll answer any questions that you might have. Fair enough? Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay. By the mere fact you're here at the police department, okay, I'm sure you've seen this on TV 100 times, okay? I'm going to read this to you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, okay?
The sign said victim services unit, children something.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, yeah, what about that?
There wasn't any children hurt, was it?
I don't know. We'll get to that. I don't know. Okay. Let me read this to you. Then I'll answer the questions that you might have. Fair enough.
Eventually, a few years would go by, and in 2015, James was given 12 life sentences and an additional 3,318 years for attempted murders and also for the explosives. Why exactly James did what he did? Well, boy, there is a lot of information to try and understand why. First, we'll start off with some interviews he gave with a psychiatrist, and then go from there.
We've got lots of time to talk, and we don't have to cover everything, certainly in one day. Can you give me an idea of how you're doing now?
Just keeping to a routine.
To a routine of...
Exercise, reading, sleeping.
Okay. Are you getting a bit of exercise?
Yeah.
What kind of exercise are you able to get?
Well, I can do pacing in the cell, and then I do jumping jacks and sit-ups.
Okay. Do you get out of the cell very often?
Usually 2 hours a day. There's like a hallway, and it lives out there in like common area.
Okay. And when you do that, you're still by yourself, except for security?
Yes.
Okay. How about yard time?
They do have a yard, but I don't like it. It's kind of like a enclosed box. There's no grass or anything.
Yeah, it looked kind of stark.
Yeah, it's sparse.
As I talked with you, I noticed that your pupils are a bit enlarged. Is that normal for you?
They've been enlarged ever since I was in jail.
Okay. That's interesting.
They said it might have been because of the medications.
Okay. Does it trouble you, or the light's particularly bright?
No, it doesn't bother me.
Okay. Before you went to jail, were they also sometimes enlarged, or do you recall?
No, they were just normal size.
Why do you suppose they're enlarged? I want to look a little bit more closely if you don't mind. Okay.
I don't know.
I don't either.
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember the day you were arrested? What
Yep.
day? What day was that?
July 20th, 2012.
Okay. And obviously, I'm testing your memory a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Do you ever get tears in your eye?
Yeah. Sometimes.
What brings tears to your eyes sometimes?
Just regrets.
Regret. Can you tell me a little more?
Usually it's before I go to sleep.
Regrets about?
About the shooting.
And usually before you go to sleep?
Yep.
Do you sometimes have trouble sleeping?
Sometimes trouble getting to sleep.
Okay. Because of?
I think it's just because I'm sedentary most of the time, so it's hard to get to sleep.
Okay. How was your night?
Good.
Remember the thoughts about buying the tear gas? What came to mind? What pressed you to do it?
No, I don't know how it changed from self-protection to aggression, offensive.
I suppose tear gas can be both offensive and defensive. But you're saying offensive is what you just said.
I primarily thought of it as offensive.
Okay.
Kind of crowd control.
Okay. Remember what your thoughts were at the time of what situation might arise in which you might use it?
If there was a riot, or if I started a riot. Kind of.
And how would tear gas come into that?
It would disperse the crowd.
And how is that an offensive move?
Because you're forcing someone to move.
Can we take it a little further? How does that accomplish an offensive task for you, if that's what you're speaking of?
I'm not sure.
My first thought is that it forces people to run away from it.
Right, that's what it's traditionally.
Why do you want them to run away from it?
So they wouldn't attack me.
That sounds defensive.
I guess it's both.
So what are you going to do as a result of their running away from you?
Avoid being attacked.
Anything else you're going to do?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you recall roughly what the next things that you bought were?
Then I think I bought the handgun.
And which handgun or what handgun did you buy?
Glock 22 40 caliber.
Okay. Was this also online, or did you get it at a store or order it?
I tried to buy it online because it was cheaper online, but there's firearm transfer. There's a bureaucracy to it. You have to go through. So I just went to the in-store and bought it there.
Okay. Any particular reason you chose a Glock 40 or Glock 22 40 caliber?
The 40 caliber has more stopping power than the 22 or 9 mil. So that's why I chose that one.
But less than a 44 or 45. Why'd you pick 40?
Well, as you go up, it creates more recoil in the gun. So you're less accurate, I guess.
Sounds like you researched that a bit.
A little, yeah.
How did you research it?
Just online searches.
You got a Glock 40 with these characteristics. Anticipating what, if anything?
That I could use it for self-defense initially. But then it went towards other purposes.
Other purposes?
Yeah, offensive.
Like what?
Like shooting a person.
At the time, if you remember, what was the picture or the thought or the fantasy in which you might use it?
Well, just in a mass murder situation.
That's different, at least in my mind, from shooting an individual person, a single person who's near you or in the room with you. You said mass murder. Tell me what the thought was.
Oh, shooting into the crowd instead of picking out people.
Okay. Did you have a particular crowd in mind or particular setting in mind at that time?
No, not at that time.
So, going back now over 2 years, what do you think the crowd looked like? Where was it? What were they doing? What was going on?
It was just a crowd. There wasn't any specific setting to it. So it was still abstract.
In that abstract, in general, was the crowd, for example, trying to do something to you? Or doing something else? Or
They were just going about their business.
okay. Yesterday we talked about a word that some people use to describe you inside as angry.
Right.
Okay. As you were thinking about these things, buying a Glock, ordering the tear gas, are you angry, or what's the thought inside you at that time?
Kind of that I had a mission to complete.
Mission to complete?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound angry, but maybe it is. Is angry in there anywhere?
No, there's no anger.
Okay. Tell me more about the mission to complete thought.
Just that it was something I had to do.
Did the word mission come out of you or come from somewhere else?
From me.
From me, from you. Okay. Did the having to do it come from inside you or from somewhere else?
Inside me.
What do you make of that? What's the something you had to do? Tell me more about what that is.
It's like I was obligated to do it.
In what way obligated?
That there was no other alternative to doing something else compared to it.
Situation at the theater, as I'm understanding, you had to do with a plan and thoughts of killing people. The situation at your apartment, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Was the other purpose of diversion.
It's a different purpose and not specifically having to do with hurting or killing people.
Right.
Okay. But you realized there was a chance that that might happen.
Yes, I wouldn't want to be in that room when anything went off.
Would you want to be in the next door apartment when anything went off?
I don't think it would have carried that far.
What about the bullets if they'd gone off the shells?
Well, since they're not in a tube or a barrel, they're going to explode in all directions.
And how did, I think that's a true statement, what I understand about shells that you toss into a campfire or something. How did you know that?
Just thinking it through.
Okay. I guess that makes me ask, what did the shootings have to do, if anything, with hating people?
Just that they make me anxious, and because they make me anxious, I hate them.
You describe that hatred as wanting to avoid. Because they make me anxious, I want to avoid them.
Right.
And you were pretty careful, I think, to say you did not mean because they make me anxious, I'm mad at them and I want to kill them.
No, because I wasn't mad at anybody in the theater.
Okay. And what I'm trying to put together is, and it may not go together, the shooting of the people in the theater doesn't sound like it has anything to do with I want to avoid people. I hate broccoli and I want to avoid it. I hate people and I want to avoid them. That doesn't lead in my simple mind to a situation where you kill people. Now, this was not a simple situation, I understand.
Right. But if you kill them, then you're not dealing with them. You're avoiding them.
On the other hand, you don't have to go to the theater in the first place.
Right.
You can. There are other ways
Yeah,
to avoid them besides killing them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you said earlier that the killing had to do with assuming some of their value.
Right.
Okay. Do the two things go together, or are they somehow put together?
They're completely different reasons.
Okay. Did they coexist in the killing, or was the hating like broccoli a separate thing and didn't have to do with the killing? Or do you know?
I don't think it had much to do with the killing.
Okay. Okay. And by the way, I want you to know, and whoever looks at the tape, that we're talking about something that was 2 years ago.
Right.
When you were in a very different state of mind, at least in some ways, than you are today. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. If there was a wish to fix you, or to, on the one hand, fix things, fix your mind, and on the other hand, prevent the mission from taking place, prevent the track that things were on, to stop that.
That kind of overruled the treatment.
It overruled the treatment.
Yeah.
Pretty strong force.
Yep.
Where does such a strong force come from?
I don't know. It just took hold of my mind.
I'm sorry?
Took hold of my mind.
Took hold of your mind. There are some pretty strong forces that take hold of people's minds sometimes. The impulse to drink for alcoholics, to shoot up for heroin addicts, to do other things.
Yep.
Any thoughts about why this took such irrevocable hold of your mind, such unbeatable hold of your mind?
I don't know why it dominated, but it did.
But it did, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you think of any other ways to stop it?
Well, at that point, I was more concerned with going through with it than stopping it.
But going through with it, the picture in your mind was that everything was going to end with the mission. That is, you didn't plan beyond the mission. It sounds as if, and once again, correct me if I'm wrong, that nothing existed for you of import beyond the mission.
Right.
Okay. Did you see anything about the mission that said it was a wrong thing to do?
Not sure.
Seems like a pretty simple question.
Well, I knew it was legally wrong. Because you get punished for killing people.
Yeah. I'm thinking more about inside you. You're a person going through life at that point. You haven't been arrested at that point. You're thinking you may well be arrested or may be killed. No matter what you do, if I'm thinking right about the way you were thinking, life is going to end one of two ways. You're going to be killed or you're going to be put in prison, arrested. But between here and those things, thinking back on July 1st, 5th, 19th, 20th, there are people that are going to be killed and wounded.
Right.
Is there anything wrong with doing that in your state at that time?
I just consider the numbers really, not people.
How's that?
Well, I consider that it was going to be a number of people that died, kind of in conglomerate mass or something.
But as you went into the theater, you saw individual people buying tickets, getting popcorn.
No, I didn't look at any of the people.
You must have, because you didn't bump into them. You looked at them one way or
Oh,
another.
Okay. I didn't like single them out as individuals.
As you drove to the theater, you didn't go out of your way to hit pedestrians or run over dogs.
I was concentrating on getting to the theater without getting pulled over.
We come back to the concept of the things that lay at that point between you and dying or being arrested, those two things. Did it ever cross your mind that you were going to hurt people?
Not real people. It was just kind of amorphous people. People are going to get hurt, not John Doe or whatever.
If a little old lady had crossed the street in front of you on the way to the theater, would you have put on your brakes?
I would have avoided.
Okay. And why? What
Because
would have gone into avoiding that person?
That would have interfered with me carrying out the plan in going to the theater.
And that's the only reason you would have avoided hitting the little old lady?
Plus, that's kind of personal, hitting a little old lady with your car.
You don't know her. Never saw her before in your life. You don't know her name.
Okay, I guess it's not personal.
I'm sorry?
It's not personal then.
So once again, this is kind of a rhetorical question, but I'd like an answer. The only reason you wouldn't hit the little old lady is that it might interfere with your getting to the theater for your mission.
Well, and I didn't plan on hitting the old lady. It would have been a surprise.
And that's why this is a kind of a hypothetical question. It doesn't really exist. But it may give us some insight into the way you were thinking. You are not saying, one of the things you're not saying, and perhaps that's saying something, you're not saying that that's the only reason you wouldn't have hit the little old lady.
Right, I'm saying there's another reason.
And the other reason
is I didn't plan to hit an old lady. I wasn't prepared for it. So it would have come as a kind of a shock.
And so the two reasons that you wouldn't have hit the old lady, is that A, it would have interfered with the mission, and B, it would have been some visceral reaction to an unplanned situation.
That sounds about right.
Not to hit the little old lady.
Yeah.
The people who were in the theater, how do you feel about them now?
I don't know.
Okay.
They're going to make me know them, though.
At the trial, you mean?
Yeah.
I expect so. Let me go back to just after the shootings happened, in the day or two after the shootings happened.
Okay.
Wait, did you say okay?
Oh, I said okay.
Okay. Did you have any thoughts about the victims, the people that were shot, etc.?
No, I just heard the numbers. It's like over 50 wounded and 12 died.
What came to mind as you heard the numbers?
It was new information. I didn't know that while I was in the theater.
Any feelings come to mind? Any pictures or feelings come to mind as you got that information?
Just that I was worth 12 more people than I was before.
Okay. Do the wounded count in your worth in that way of thinking about things, or no?
I only count fatalities.
Okay. So is there a difference in the way you think about the wounded than in the way you think about the deceased, about the dead?
Yes.
And what are the two ways that you think about it?
What are the two?
What are the two ways? What are the ways you think about the dead versus the way you think about the wounded?
Well, the dead can't be repaired or come back to life or be normal again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of irreversible.
And what I heard you say was that accrues to something positive for you.
Right.
Okay. What about the wounded?
They're like collateral damage, I guess.
Any thoughts about them after the event?
I regret they had to be wounded.
In what sense do you regret that? Excuse me. In what sense? What do you mean by I regret that they had to be wounded?
Rather than like the bullets just missing them or something.
Do you think there was any chance at all that the bullets would just miss people unless they were destined to die?
I think it was statistical. You shoot enough bullets into a crowd, you're going to hit somebody.
Can you help me understand the regret that you felt that they had to be wounded?
Well, they get debilitated, and some get paralyzed or lose limbs, and like it's too bad that couldn't have been avoided.
Is your view that it couldn't be avoided?
It couldn't be avoided because I'm basically shooting blind into this crowd of people, so.
But that's the way you set it up.
Right. So it couldn't be avoided.
But that's the way you set it up.
So if I had set it up differently and like aimed specifically for the people, I guess it could have been different.
You set it up so that people would be wounded, not killed. Does that make sense?
Not intentionally. I set it up so that people would die.
How is it not intentional that you set up a situation, you planned it meticulously, to use your word, that you wouldn't be able to see well or aim well?
Right. So
which is the way that people
keep
get
it
wounded.
impersonal.
Which is the way that people get wounded instead of killed, instead of all killed.
So I didn't know a way to make it impersonal and still be able to kill them.
But once again, you're a smart guy, and you plan meticulously. I think of situations, and it's a hypothetical thought, of course, of snipers. They get very, very good at what they do and tend to kill rather than wound.
Right. Well, as I said, my aim wasn't that great, so I couldn't really do a sniper.
Okay, we can pick a different way to do it. My point is that intellectually, your argument seems to be failing to me. That people got wounded because of the way you set it up.
Right, that's true. People got
Okay.
wounded.
because of the way you set it up.
Yes, because of
Okay.
the way, the nature.
The people who were killed, that, as I understand it, there's no regret or less regret for the ones that were killed because you accrue their value. At least that's the way you felt at that time. Is that right?
Right.
Did you have any thought about those that they left behind? Their
Also
relatives.
collateral damage.
The argument begins to sound pretty quickly like the ends justify the means. Make sense?
Yeah.
If that's not a reasonable way to think about it, I really would like to hear what your view of it was at that time. Not necessarily looking back at it, but what your view was at that time and before the shootings. That there was an awareness, at least intellectual awareness, it seems to me, of lots of collateral damage.
Right.
But the end justified the means. Is that a reasonable way of thinking about it or not?
There was no way to avoid it. And with that plan.
With that plan, there was no
Yes.
way to avoid.
And I was already dedicated to the plan.
What do you suppose locked you into that plan?
Just that it was realistic and it could be done.
But the collateral damage was part of the realistic part, and that was going to happen.
Well, I didn't figure the collateral damage had anything to do with me
Really?
after the crime. It wouldn't matter.
To you or to anybody?
To me,
Would it matter to somebody else?
certainly the people who were injured, yeah.
And how about to the people who were family members of the people who died?
Yeah, them too.
Okay. Did those folks come to mind at all as you were planning?
No.
Even as it's logical that this will happen, but the end justifies the means?
There was no fear of consequences.
I'm sorry?
There was no fear of consequences.
Was there any awareness of consequences?
Yes.
Okay. I'm curious as to how you made the awareness of consequences evolve into a lack of fear or concern about the consequences.
I don't understand the question.
I don't think you're a cruel guy.
Okay, I don't either.
Okay. I don't think you're a cruel guy. You don't go out and, I mean, in the lab you may sacrifice rats, okay?
Right.
But you don't go out and hit little old ladies and you cry when your dog dies. You don't go and torture animals or anything like that. I don't think you're a cruel guy.
Okay.
But somehow, once again, correct me if I'm wrong, the awareness that other people would be badly hurt was not enough to stop the mission. And it sounds as if you're telling me that the awareness that they would be hurt somehow became a lack of concern about the consequences to them or anybody else.
Right.
Okay. Can you help me with how that,
Why that is the way it is.
and why is sort of an odd question. Sometimes why is not the right question.
Okay.
But it may be in this case. I'm wondering about the process. How does it go from there are going to be many people hurt in lots of different ways? How does it move from, okay, that's going to happen, but I'm going to do it anyway, and I have no concern for the consequences? Because I think in general, you do have concern for at least many other people.
Right, so that's all kind of appearing now that it's after the fact that it's happened. But before it happened, I wasn't counting on dealing with any of it because I could have died.
And you're bringing another part into it that may be real important. You said not dealing with it. I'm not remembering your exact words, but not dealing with the consequences.
Right. So now I have to deal with the consequences.
Before the shootings,
I didn't think ahead, so I wouldn't have to deal with the consequences.
right after the shooting, were you concerned with the wounded or whether anybody was going to get hurt at the apartment?
I inquired if a child was hurt because I saw a sign that said like child division homicide or something.
As you came into the Aurora?
Yeah, I inquired over
PD,
the investigators.
And did anybody tell you one way or the other whether a child was hurt?
No, they were evasive.
What do you
But I
think?
put it together
What did you put together?
that a child was killed the next day, I think.
How did you react at that time when you put that together?
That I tried to minimize child fatalities by choosing midnight, PG-13.
Okay, so it would be grown-ups at that showing of that particular movie. Is that what you're saying?
That was what was intended, yeah. So it wouldn't be like,
Once you learned that a child was killed, that you had killed a child,
yeah, it was remorseful.
tell me more. Remorseful is 3 syllables. Tell me more in 1 syllable words or so of how you felt.
That I was sad that a child had died.
Did you think much about it?
Yeah.
Do you still think much about it?
I don't know how it could have been avoided though, other than changing the plan to something else.
If you had known that a child was going to be killed, would you have changed the plans, do you think?
No, I think I would have still carried them out.
If you had known that lots of children were going to be hurt, dozens of children were going to be hurt,
Then I'd have to change the plan to make it impersonal and not with children.
and you're aware that dozens of children were hurt,
I am not aware of that. I didn't know this. Children.
I'm sorry?
I'm not aware of that.
Once again, you're a smart guy. You think about the plan meticulously,
Right,
but not much about the consequences of the plan.
right.
What about the children of people who are killed? Are they hurt?
I didn't consider family and friends of the deceased or the wounded.
What do you think now? Are the children hurt when their parents are killed?
Yep.
Are they hurt when their parents are wounded?
Yeah.
Yeah. So at least in that sense, dozens of children were hurt.
Indirectly.
The children are still hurt.
Yeah.
Does that make you feel anything as we talk?
Not so great.
Tell me a little more. What do you mean not so great?
Well, it wasn't my intention to kill children or leave them parentless or like that stuff.
Soon after the shootings, days, weeks, Did you think that there were some children? Did it occur to you that there were some children who were parentless?
Who or what?
Who were parentless? Who'd lost one or both parents?
No, I never took that perspective.
Did it ever cross your mind, other than taking the perspective, did it ever cross your mind that there were
No.
children who now had lost a parent?
I'd only considered the children who'd been directly hurt.
And as you're approaching the mission, approaching the shooting, it sounds as if it didn't occur to you. One way or another, it did not occur to you that some of the people that were going to be killed would be parents.
No, didn't occur to me.
You've talked about remorse or regret. You've used the word a couple of times. Almost, and I'm not sure of the feeling that goes into the words. Can you help me understand the feeling that goes into the words remorse and regret as you're using them the last couple of days with me?
That's kind of hard because they are the descriptors of the feeling.
What are some other ways to describe the feelings that you have about remorse and regret? If you have them, I'm not assuming that.
I don't know.
Do you have those feelings?
Sometimes.
When did they come to you? When do those feelings come?
Just when I'm alone in my cell.
That's a lot. You're alone a lot.
Right.
Any particular time of the day or night that those feelings come to you?
Not really, no.
Sometimes make it hard to sleep, for example.
No.
James, from the beginning of June until his day of rampage, was writing in his journal about horrible things, and essentially it was about killing and a lot of rambling about stuff he called human capital. Basically, he would somehow gain power and value to his own life by killing others. It's really just a dumb concept that James came up with because he was delusional and a maniac. James, for months and months, became obsessed with killing, and I don't know why his ex-girlfriend never reported him, considering what he said to her, and if only someone would have reported him, but even that might not have done anything. James spiraled until the very end, and unfortunately there's still a lot of very bizarre and unanswered questions that pertain to this case. James's parents, Robert and Arlene, were shocked by this entire ordeal. Same with James's sister. They had no idea the monster that he was going to be, but Arlene, I believe, did have an idea because of what she told the therapist way earlier. But regardless, what James did was pure evil. I also want to tell you a little bit about each person that was killed. All 12 of them had lives of their own, just like you and I. Veronica Mosier Sullivan was only 6 years old and the youngest victim, and she was at the movie preview with her mother, Ashley Mosier, and her soon-to-be cousin, Kaylin, and her mother's boyfriend, Jameson. When the shooting started, Veronica was killed very fast, and her mother, Ashley, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, was also shot 3 times. Ashley was paralyzed, but ended up surviving. However, her baby Taves Mosier, did not survive the shooting. Kaylin, the soon-to-be cousin, also babysitter, was not shot, and she called 911. I won't play that call because it's terribly sad. Kaylin tried to give Veronica CPR, but wasn't able to because when the mother, Ashley, had gotten shot, she fell on top of Veronica. It's very, very upsetting, and I really, really hope that Ashley and Kaylin and Jameson are doing the best that they can be doing. Alexander Jonathan, or AJ Boyk, was 18 years old and had just recently graduated from Gateway High School. There, he was the catcher on the baseball team and also the first chair viola in the school's orchestra. AJ had dreams to open his own art studio and be the teacher. He loved doing pottery, playing baseball, and just life in general. AJ is described as being super funny and very bright. That awful night he was at the movie theater, he was with his fiancée, Lasamoa Cross. They realized something bad was happening, and they stood up and were about to start running. Lasamoa said AJ then turned around with a very shocked look on his face and fell to the ground. Lasamoa said she wasn't able to help AJ get out of the theater, and so she left for herself and said she thought that AJ left out of a different door. A few years later, Lasamoa actually fell in love with one of the responding officers. Good for her. But rest in peace to AJ Boyk. Michaela Carolyn Medic was 23 years old, and she typically went by Kayla. Kayla was a vibrant young woman that loved Hello Kitty, fairies, and also spending Thursday nights with her dad. She was the youngest of her parents' children, and it said she had an infectious laugh and a radiant spirit. That she was described as a sandwich artist at Subway, where she worked. Kayla was also a huge Green Bay Packers fan. She'd watch every game with her dad and sister, and she was a sweet girl who would rarely ask for anything. Kayla was at the theater that night with 6 of her friends, and after the shooting rang out, the friends all tried to leave. Kayla got shot and yelled out to her friends that she got shot, and then she fell to the floor. Her friends tried to carry her out of the theater, but said that the authorities didn't let them. Rest in peace to Kayla, a very vibrant young woman. Jessica, or Jessie Nicole Redfield Gowie, was 24 years old and a die-hard hockey fan who was vibrant and filled with life. Jessie wanted to start a charity to help victims of Colorado wildfires. Jessie was also an intern at 104.3 The Fan, and she was an aspiring sportscaster. Her family stated that she was well known for spontaneous acts of kindness, that she would write letters to friends just to tell them how special they are. An interesting thing about Jessie is that a month before this, she was at the Easton Center in Toronto, Canada, when a shooting broke out. I believe this was either gang-related or affiliated somehow, but 2 people were killed and a bunch of bystanders were injured. Jessie wrote about this entire experience in a blog that she ran, and it's just a bit coincidental what would happen a month later. I'm going to read 3 paragraphs that were at the end of her blog. Jessie writes, "I was shown how fragile life was on Saturday. I saw the terror on bystanders' faces. I saw the victims of a senseless crime. I saw lives change. I was reminded that we don't know when or where our time on earth will end, when or where we will breathe our last breath. For one man, it was in the middle of a busy food court on a Saturday evening. I say all the time that every moment we have to live our life is a blessing. So often I have found myself taking it for granted. Every hug from a family member, every laugh we share with friends, even the times of solitude are all blessings. Every second of every day is a gift. After Saturday evening, I know I truly understand how blessed I am for each second I am given. I feel like I am overreacting about what I experienced, but I can't help but be thankful for whatever caused me to make the choices that I made that day. My mind keeps replaying what I saw over in my head. I hope the victims make a full recovery. I wish I could shake this odd feeling from my chest, the feeling that's reminding me how blessed I am, the same feeling that made me leave the Eaton Center, the feeling that may have potentially saved my life." Jessie that awful day went to the theater with her friend Brent Lowak. To add to this, she was active on Twitter or X very consistently in 2012, and at 8:27 p.m. on July 19th of 2012, Jessie tweeted, "Never thought I'd have to coerce a guy into seeing the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises with me." Hours later, while seated in the theater, Jessie tweeted one last time at 1:22 a.m. and said, "Of course we're seeing Dark Knight. Red-headed Texan Spitfire. People should never argue with me. Maybe I should get in on one of those NHL talks." Now, I also believe this could have been at 12:22 a.m. because of the timeline, but for some reason on Twitter it says 1:22 a.m. But when the shooting started, both Jessie and Brent dropped to the floor, and Brent noticed Jessie was shot in the leg. He started to apply pressure because he was actually a paramedic. Brent then noticed that Jesse had been shot in the head as well and wasn't going to make it. So he prayed over Jesse and then left and got shot, or was shot, twice himself. Rest in peace to Jesse. Alexander, or Alex Charles Teves, was 24 years old, and it's said that he lived a life of pure joy and enthusiasm, that he was a hero to everyone that knew him. Alex had a very contagious smile, a great sense of humor, a passion for craft beer, and he also loved the outdoors. Alex had a goal to help people daily, and it was said that he conducted individual, group, and crisis counseling to students and their families. It's also said he helped to mentor troubled youth and had just recently graduated from the University of Denver with a master's degree in psychology. Alex was furthering his education by getting a degree in physical therapy as well. Alex, on July 20th of 2012, was at the movie theater with his girlfriend, Amanda. When the shooting started, Alex lunged in front of Amanda to protect her. Amanda said that they were very in love and that Alex was always her protector and angel. Rest in peace to Alex. Jonathan Thomas Blunk was 26 years old and a husband and father of 2 children. He, right out of high school, joined the Navy and ended up serving on the USS Nimitz. Jonathan had served for 5 years and had plans to re-enlist into the service to become a Navy SEAL. Jonathan, ironically, was nicknamed Joker JT by his grandparents. He was also very drawn to Colorado because of the Rocky Mountains and their sports teams, specifically the Denver Broncos. Jonathan was a hard worker and a responsible and loyal man. On July 20th of 2012, Jonathan and his girlfriend Jansen Young went to see The Dark Knight Rises. When the shooting started, Jonathan threw Jansen to the ground and shielded her. Unfortunately, he was shot in the process and did not make it. Rest in peace to Jonathan. Alex Sullivan was 27 years old, and July 20th was actually his birthday. Alex had a tradition of going to the movie theater for his birthday every year, and that year, or 2012, wasn't going to be any different. Alex was considered to be a gentle giant and a guy that was always smiling, who was friends with everyone. Alex loved movies very much, so much to the point that he had taken jobs at a theater just to see free movies. He also loved comic books and sports, specifically baseball with the New York Mets. Alex was typically called Sully by his friends, and he was a smart and funny guy. Alex that night went to see The Dark Knight Rises with a bunch of his co-workers, and he was extremely excited. He bought a Batman hat and arrived to the theater at around 5 p.m. on July 19th. Alex was so ecstatic to the point that he even made a tweet at, it says 1 a.m., but I believe it was 12 a.m. that day, saying, #The Dark Knight Rises at @real_nerds. Oh man, 1 hour till the movie, and it's going to be the best birthday ever. I really genuinely wished that it could have been the best birthday ever for him. So upsetting. Rest in peace to Alex. Matthew, or Matt Robert McQuinn, was 27 years old, and at the time he was a customer service representative for Target. Matt was also a member of church. He loved playing golf and playing Little League baseball and football with some organizations he was a part of. He was considered to be a good person that was a ton of fun to be around. Matt was also a reliable person, someone that you could count on. While working at Target, he met his girlfriend Samantha. They had been dating for about 8 months or so. But Matt, that July night, went out to the movies with Samantha and her brother Nick. When the shooting began, it was said that James calmly walked up the aisle, and this is when both Matt and Nick jumped on Samantha to protect her. Samantha had gotten shot once in the knee, Nick didn't get shot, and unfortunately Matt was killed in the process. Rest in peace to Matt. John Thomas Larimer was a 27-year-old man who was smart, funny, and very witty. It said he was great at trivia games and often would dumb himself down just to give others a chance at winning. John, at the age of 26, joined the Navy, specifically in June of 2011 as a cryptologic technician, 3rd class. For a year or so, John was stationed at the U.S. Fleet Cyber Command Station at Buckley Air Force Base in Aurora. John was dating a woman named Julia Votchek, and on July 20th of 2012, this couple and a few other sailor friends of John's were at the movie theater. When the shooting began, John pushed one of his friends down to the floor and also shielded or protected Julia, and sadly, he was killed in the process. Rest in peace to John Larimer, Navy Petty Officer 3rd Class. Jesse Evan Childress was 29 years old and an Air Force Staff Sergeant. Specifically, he was an Air Force Reserve Cyber Systems Operation Technician. He enlisted in the year 2002 with the Army, and there he trained as a satellite systems operator. 8 years later, in 2010, Jesse joined the Air Force Reserve. A year later, in 2011, he joined the Navy and became a cryptologic technician. Jesse was a huge sports fan. He specifically rooted for the Denver Broncos, the LA Clippers, and the LA Kings. Jesse was also super into comics and superheroes, and had even named his car the Batmobile. Jesse went to the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises on July 20th of 2012 with another reservist named Munire Gravelli. I also believe they were with other friends. When the shooting started, Jesse threw himself in front of Munire, and his life was taken in the process. Rest in peace to Jesse. Rebecca Ann Hernandez Wingo was 32 years old and a mother of 2. By the age of 12, Rebecca had already lived in 3 states and 2 countries. By the time she was 20, she was fluent in Mandarin and English, and she started working for the United States Air Force as a translator. Rebecca was considered to be an amazing person that had her own sort of gravity that made people love her. Rebecca also spent 10 years living in Hawaii and serving as a translator, and she overall loved life. At the time, though, Rebecca was living in Colorado with her children and working as a customer relations representative at a mobile medical imaging company. On July 20th of 2012, Rebecca went to the movie theater with her friend, Marcus Weaver. They had only known each other for about a month. When the gunfire started, these two dropped to the ground, and Rebecca was shot very quickly, and so was her friend Marcus. However, he was shot in the arm twice and only wounded. Marcus then apparently carried Rebecca out of the theater, even though he was injured, and she was injured as well, also unconscious. But I also read that he couldn't do anything to get her out, so he just ran out of the doors himself. I'm not sure what actually happened. Unfortunately, she would not make it though, and rest in peace to Rebecca. The final victim of this shooting was named Gordon Ware Cowden, and he was 51 years old. Gordon worked as a real estate appraiser and was described as being a true Texas gentleman that loved his life and family. He was a father of 4. Gordon was a good guy, a gentle man, and very kind, smart, and caring. It's also said that he was patient and charming and such a good person that one time he stopped the family's car to herd a prairie dog to safety. On July 20th of 2012, Gordon went to the movies with 2 of his daughters, and when the gunfire broke out, unfortunately, Gordon was shot and killed. Both of his daughters were not injured, and they made it out okay. Rest in peace to Gordon Cowden. Rest in peace to all of the people's lives who were lost on this tragic day, and I hope all of their families are able to one day find a bit of peace. This case was absolutely tragic, and so many people were affected. It was genuinely not the easiest thing to get through. Lastly, there is an extension to this video that you will be able to find on my Patreon here soon. I go into depth about some things that weren't exactly allowed on YouTube. This is pertaining to things that I mentioned throughout the video. If you'd like to watch that part, it'll be available on my Patreon for the lowest tier subscription. Thank you for watching. Take care, friend.